Have you ever wondered which is the best school in the world to learn French? Because I have, and I think about it quite a lot, and if you're asking this question, you're likely in search of a high level of quality. My name's Chris, by the way, and I run We Communicate, which is a French school I started in 2018. And it so happens that the question of the very best school in the world interests me also. Is it Alliance Française? Is it an Ivy League school such as Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard? Is it an unknown teacher in some village somewhere in the jungle? So to answer this question, I propose we apply a series of logical criteria to answer the question. The idea of the best has to be defined. After all, Porsche, Lamborghini and Bentley are all the best in their own right, but for other things it's Volkswagen that's the best. Such as the day you have to move an armchair around in your car. You wouldn't want a Porsche for that job. To qualify as the best, language schools have to find a method that makes it possible for the student to learn French at a high quality level and in great conditions. I think it's fair. But what I found over the years is that the French language schools always fell short in one or the other area on the scoreboard. They never exactly made it to number one. So to my greatest happiness, We Communicate consistently beat them for number 2 spot. How's that? A reason for not being number 1 could be that a school might propose French among several other languages, which then makes them non-specialized as well as focused on expansion rather than quality. This isn't what Bugatti does, you might agree. Or if they were specialized, like says, they usually fall victim to hyper-specialization and can only ever teach French following a certain formatted point of view, which happens to be FLE French. I don't think that one can be the best and have very little freedom to innovate. This isn't usually what the best do. To further complicate matters, there are many schools whose sole purpose is to entertain. They might be the very best at providing fun conditions for low-level learning, but not for anything meaningful. I don't think that these can be considered for the number 1 spot. Then we have the corporation type schools that have international headquarters and employ hundreds of freelance tutors. In their case, I think it's both their size and business model that renders quality control impossible. And besides, I think it's clear that their interest is rather expansion. And then of course we have our colleges and universities whose teaching format is rather built for lecture halls instead of individual performance. They often specialize in delivering certificates and the organization of formatted language tests. Then I've noticed that there are also the many language schools that feel that the identity of the owner is of no consequence. But I feel that a school that hides the linguistic achievements of their manager can't be number 1 either. And lastly, I feel that any school that sells language by the hour is also admitting to a lack of reflection on their trade. Jaguar does not sell you miles per gallon. They're not competing on metrics, they're not competing on price. They sell you craftsmanship instead. So achieving the number 2 spot in the world is less achievable than first appears. Let's now talk about the number 2 spot in the world. Because in all due modesty, I make the claim that we are the number 2 school in the world for French. And how do I know that? Well, I know that by comparing We Communicate to the number 1 spot. It was really simple deductive reasoning, and I will be revealing, by the way, who the number 1 school in the world is later in this video. Before claiming this number 2 spot, I had to do a series of things, some very hard things. For example, I had to put all my faith and heart into this school, often for 0 pay. And when the cement of your walls hold together with love, I think it's a different type of building. Next, I had to be born in very unusual conditions, almost like a calling in life. I was born a perfect bilingual of 2 languages, English and French. Obviously not from the first day onwards. It took a few years, but it came, slowly but surely. So what does this mean? It doesn't just mean that I speak them well, these 2 languages, but that I feel them, as well as teach them. I teach English and French, I feel English and French. And this also is much of what made We Communicate the number 2 school in the world for speakers of English wanting to learn French. And all the while I was improving my own teaching method, and I found that before you even said your first word in French, I knew exactly which mistake you were going to make before you even made it. Why? Because I know you inside out, linguistically and culturally. I know what you're going to do when you learn French before you even do it. It's fantastic. But it's not just about natural talent. Because at age 34 I did another rare thing. I went to university to do a master's in linguistics and literature. Then I did a 6th year after my master's to be a teacher called a PGCE, Postgraduate Certificate in Education, and after that I did a few TEFL certificates to be a teacher of English as a foreign language. And I know what it feels like to be a student as an adult. It's not something that's in my distant memory that I did when I was in my 20s, as most teachers do. And by the way, I learnt German and Dutch. And my very last argument for the number 2 spot in the world is that we communicate always improving. This website's always being refined. As I meet new students, always new exercises are being added, new ideas. Only the number 1 school in the world does it better than us. And now I'll reveal who the number 1 school in the world is for French. It's all about logical criteria. The French school at the number 1 spot puts some amazing abilities at your disposal. They can do everything we do plus 1. That's how you get to number 1 spot. So they're not only small in size to control quality, but they're also so passionate that they poured even more sweat and tears into it. They worked for even less money, less than 0, for months and months. They're not only linguistic oddities like us and know the culture and language of 4 countries, but they can do it for 5 countries, 1 more than us. They can switch between 5 countries in terms of language and culture. And they grew up between 5 countries, and they also know these countries as insiders. I said I can only do 4, they can do 5. And just like us, they can read you as speakers of English. But they can do it plus 1. They can do it from 1 more language. Not only is the number 1 school in the world experts in UK culture, American, Belgian and French, but they can also do it plus 1 for either Switzerland or Luxembourg. As rare as it is to find a school that matches our set of skills, well, this school at number 1 spot one-ups us in every respect. Instead of growing up in a family with 2 languages and cultures, they grew up in a family that had 3. But after that, they went off to university to study these 3 languages for 5 years, and they also added a 4th one. They specialised in teaching each of these 3 languages. It's quite amazing. This number 1 school in the world for French has a website just like me, but just a bit better. They offer online support for any question, but just a bit better also. So for all the reasons I've just mentioned, I modestly admit to my number 2 place in the world. I can't be any better than my already unusual circumstances allow me to be. So if any of you French learners are lucky enough to meet this teacher, hang on to them. Because there's probably only 1 such individual on planet Earth. It might even be God, because I'd bet my last penny that no human does this.